So, hello everybody, and welcome to our session today, Invoice Automation for Fast and Early Payments. And with me today, I have Alex Lente, who is the VP of Product Management for Ariba Network, and Saeed Razavi, who is the Senior Director for Solution Management for Payments and Financing. And I'll turn it over to these gentlemen to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Alex Lente. As Lorraine said, I'm Vice President of Product Management for the Ariba Network. My team and I are responsible for everything related to invoice automation, globalization, and a few other things on the Ariba Network. Saeed?
Thanks. Yeah. So my name's Saeed Razavi, Solution Management for Payments and Financing. I've been with SAP Ariba for about 5 years now, and I look after our financial ecosystem partners, some of which I'll mention in the presentation, plus our discount management solution.
Great, thank you so much, and we'll go right ahead.
Thank you, Lorraine. So let's start. How do we frame the solutions that we're going to be talking today? First, we have something in the SAP. SAP talks about the intelligence enterprise. And within the intelligence enterprise, these solutions are part of the source-to-pay business processes. And very specifically, the invoice-to-pay. So everything that we're going to be talking today is framed inside creating and managing invoices, creating and applying early payments, and also discounts, and also other related business processes. In the invoice automation side, as you all know, the best practices for creating and managing invoices start when the invoice is created, validating the invoice, doing the legalization of the invoice or the electronic signatures, sending, receiving, verifying, approving, and paying. But when we talk about invoices, right, this is the whole business process, but there are differences in this business process. The left-hand side, usually the supplier side, is responsible for creating that invoice is the accounts receivable team. On the right-hand side, the team that is part of the buyers, that will be the accounts payable side, they are responsible for receiving and reconciling those invoices. And then you also have different solutions. For instance, on the left-hand side, you have what we usually generally call invoice automation solutions. And on the right-hand side, you have invoice management solutions. Each one of these business processes have their own key goals, right? Obviously, the accounts receivable side, they want to get paid earlier, and the accounts payable side wants to pay the right things. Okay, so there are many solutions that address these business processes. And we are, as I mentioned before, we're going to be focused on the left-hand side. We're going to be focused on creating, validating, signing, sending, and paying, and providing more engaging process and collaboration process between buyers and suppliers on this process. The Ariba network is the solution that we're going to be focused on. And the Ariba network, for those of you that are not aware, is the largest business-to-business network in the world. Okay, we transact 4.5 million. We have 4.5 million trading partners in the Ariba network. We have almost 500 million documents traded annually, almost $3 trillion in commerce. Okay, and this, so that you understand the volume of the Ariba network, and if these numbers are not enough, right? This is more transactions and more spend that flows through the Ariba network annually than some of our competitors and some of other companies in this space do in their lifetime over the last 10 years. So this volume and the transactions and the collaboration that we enable through the Ariba network are represented on this slide. You can see there are many collaboration processes, over 65 collaboration processes. We're going to be focused again on this presentation and this session. We're going to be focused on the light blue, on the invoice and pay area. And these are the transactions and these are the collaborations that we enable between buyers and suppliers. Invoice automation, for those of you that are not familiar with the term, right? And as we start from the creation of the invoice on the accounts receivable side, that can be done manually. Somebody can come to the Ariba network and create an invoice manually on the Ariba network. We provide a UI and a lot of business processes for that. That invoice could have been created on the supplier backend system and sent via an integrated format into the Ariba network. So you create your invoice on your side in your system, and then you send to the Ariba network. That integration can be done through EDI or 6ML, or via PDF. Okay. There are many other ways that this can be done, and different ways that other systems integrate to the Ariba network. You can reach out to some of our colleagues that on the delivery side that will help you with all these details. And then the Ariba network, when we receive an invoice, we go through the process of doing the legalization of that invoice. So we reach out to some partners like TrustWeaver, like Edicom, like Sequel, and we sign that invoice electronically, and then we send that invoice to your buyer, and the buyer will receive that invoice that you created, already legalized, already with the electronic stamp, so that they can receive that and load into their ERP systems and do the whole processing of receiving and reconciling and paying your invoice. What is also important for you to understand is the Ariba network, we have over 200 business rules, okay? And these business rules, what they try to do is to enforce certain business processes so that both buyers and suppliers will have the perfect invoice the moment that the invoice arrives on the buyer side. For instance, some buyers say, I cannot receive an invoice unless I have received the materials or the services and I have approved them. Okay, so the Ariba network will provide the necessary business rules so that you will only be allowed to send an invoice or create an invoice if those conditions are met. Okay, certain countries require certain fields to be mandatory on the invoice. We are also going to make sure that those fields are present on the invoice before you send that invoice to the buyer. So some of you may say, well, but this is very limiting. Today I can create an invoice and send to the buyer. Yes, true, but it may take longer for you to get paid because that invoice is going to go through some validation processes and maybe some reconciliation processes. And the buyer will say, unfortunately, I cannot accept this invoice because it hasn't met this criteria. And that is not transparent to you. What the Ariba network does is make this whole process, this whole collaboration between buyers and suppliers transparent to you. And Said is going to talk a lot about the benefits of having these processes in place so that you can get paid faster, that you can get paid earlier, and the buyer will receive the invoice and receive the benefits of early payment with some discounts. What else? I think that all of you on the supplier side, you understand that there are differences between invoices in different parts of the world, right? Maybe you are a supplier that is located in just one country, so you actually don't care or don't understand the differences in other countries. We have to do that. We in the Ariba network have to understand all the differences between each one of the countries. We have to make sure that the invoice that is created in one country is also valid in another when it's received by the buyer, or for an invoice that is created in a different country. So when we look at the countries in the world, right, we can split them in several layers. One is, first, there are countries that we cannot do transactions there, right? These are embargo countries. We don't touch we cannot do business in those countries. There are 33 countries in the world that have mandatory regulations for invoice, which means in those countries, the electronic invoice is the only way to send and receive an invoice in those countries. You cannot send paper invoice. You have to send an electronic invoice, and that's the legal tax invoice. And then there are 55 countries that have some regulations about the electronic invoice, but not necessarily a mandate, which means the invoice can be sent electronically, but can also be sent through paper. And finally, there are countries that have no regulations about electronic invoice. Receiving or sending an electronic invoice, it's okay, but there is no regulation about those invoices. How do we know that, right? I'm not a tax advisor. Okay, I've been working in this business, in this area for almost 13 years, but that doesn't give me credentials to say, hey, what is a legal invoice in one country or not? So we work very closely with tax advisors, one of the best tax advisors in the world, PwC, if not the best. We work with other partners. We work like with TrustWeaver and other partners across the globe. We also, inside SAP, we have what we call globalization services with people in almost every single country in the world. They provide us with a lot of knowledge so that when we build our solution and we create to help create invoices in the Ariba network, we have all of this under consideration. So these are the countries that we currently support. Actively, we support all the countries in the world, right? Sometimes in different ways. On the left-hand side, What you see are the countries that we support natively, and we have regulatory consistency within the Ariba network, which means we are tracking everything, little thing that changes in those countries, and we make sure that the Ariba network is consistent with those changes. And on the right-hand side, what we call pro forma, which means you can send the invoice, electronic invoice, you can attach that invoice into the Ariba network, and you send all the details to the buyer. The buyer will receive those invoices, but the official tax invoice is the attachment that you're sending, or the paper in certain countries where the electronic invoice doesn't have a mandate. So what happened in the last year, and what is happening in the future? So first of all, in last year we had done some enhancements to the product. Every year we have a lot of things coming up. Here in this list is just going to be some highlights, right? But don't think that what we are showing here is everything that we have done. So first of all, we are changing the user experience for suppliers, and we are going to talk a little bit about that now as a recent innovation. Okay, although these things were rolled out at the end of the year last year, they are still in guided beta. They are still limited to a very small subset of suppliers that are doing the testing, helping us, working with us on improving the solution. Right, this is not generally available, and these things will come out throughout 2020 on a rollout that we are going to be doing a very detailed rollout throughout the year. We introduced a new payment transaction, the payment receipt transaction, and we have an API that is going GA or general available in this quarter. This is an invoice. This is an API that will help suppliers to extract the data that they already have sent to the Ariba network. In terms of globalization, right, we have done some general enhancements. We also are keeping our regulatory consistency. In Poland and Hungary, there were changes in the regulations. In Italy, you know that Italy introduced a new electronic tax invoice regulation on January 1st, 2019. On January 1st, 2019, we were live with our solution, and we saw a major adoption of that solution. That was a big success for us. We were one of the first companies in the world that were able to address that day one. Okay, so we continued. The government in Italy continued to make changes, and we continue to address those changes throughout our solution throughout 2019. In Malaysia, we did some support for the changes in regulations, as well as in Mexico. For 2020, what we are planning in terms of innovations in 2020. First, to complete the invoice UX redesign, you are going to show you a couple slides with the new look and feel for the invoice. We are introducing some enhancements for credit memo and for goods receipt when creating invoice through goods receipt posting. And also, we're going to provide an extension of that API that I mentioned before with the details of each one of the invoice. In terms of globalization, Hungary continues to make changes to their regulations, and we're going to continue to support. India is expected to pass a new regulation, and we're going to be, whenever this becomes a law and the scope is well defined, we will start understanding that those changes, and we're going to address those changes in our product. Mexico, we are going to do the integration of the payments receipt. Thailand, we are going to be supporting Thailand language in the Ariba network, not the tax invoice, but the language. And we have plans for 2020 to start natively supporting PayPal and globalization API. So this is the big picture for of the highlights of 2019 and 2020, what we have in our roadmap. And going specifically about the new supplier user experience, I'm not going to talk specifically about this page. There is another session that we will address this, but this is going to be the new look and feel of the supplier page. So if you are used to the Ariba network, this is what you're going to be seeing very soon. And in this new page, you have a tile about orders to invoice. When you click in that tile, you will see all the orders that you receive from all your buyers, and you can do some filtering. You can sort by the buyers, by dates, by amounts, and you will have the ability to create the invoice there. This is, sorry, I'm skipping the same steps, and now this is the new look and feel for the invoice page, completely new, completely redesigned from what you see today. And if you use the Ariba network today, this will be a step change in terms of look and feel. We are going to be rolling out this very gradually. We are going to start with beta tests with several suppliers, and then we are going to expand until we go all the way to all of you throughout 2020 and early 2020. So that's it in terms of Invoice. Now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Said, to talk about payments and financing.
Yeah,
Said?
great. Thanks, Alex. So what Alex has been talking about up until now has been around invoice automation. Now, let's think about why that is so important. So as a supplier, the invoice is your demand for payment, and this should be submitted as quickly as possible without any unnecessary delay. But also, as a supplier, you want to know your invoice has to be as accurate as possible, contain all of the required information. Why? Again, so that it can quickly be approved by the buyer and processed for payment. So here we present our payments and financing solutions. The first thing to say is that many of these solutions are actually buyer-led, which means as a supplier, you benefit if your buyer has decided to implement the program. And buyers will want to do this if they hear about demand from suppliers. So what I want to do today is make you aware of these solutions, explain the benefits, and then you should ask your buyers if they have any of these programs in place and how you could participate. So first partner that we announced in 2019, last year. So as part of our financial ecosystem strategy, we announced 3 new partners. The first one was American Express. No introduction needed to the name there. We all know that brand, both from a consumer and a corporate perspective. The solution is called Virtual Card Pay on Invoice. And supplier invoices, once they have been approved, are paid using an Amex card. But this is not a physical card. It's not a card number that is passed around and used for multiple payments either. Instead, it's a single-use virtual card number that can only be used against that invoice. The next invoice will have another number and so on, etc. Now, what we do in the Ariba network is we add this card number to the remittance document and present that to the supplier. Now, supplier users that have the right access, the right credentials to view this information can view the number and the security code, and they can process the payment. The benefits to suppliers are you have the visibility on Ariba network around when your invoice has been approved for payment, the remittance document has been processed, and you have certainty around collecting the payment, unlike a check payment, for example, with which you have no visibility until you actually physically receive the check, and then there's the extra delay in processing the payment as well. So the single-use account also has other benefits like security. It reduces the likelihood of fraud. It helps buyers automate their payment processes. So buyers that are still processing checks can obviously move to an electronic process here. So that's partner number 1. On to the next slide. We have Barclaycard. So another well-known brand, especially here in Europe. The solution is pretty much invisible to suppliers here. Now, that's a good thing for you as suppliers, because if a buyer needs additional cash flow, they can get that on the back of the credit card program from Barclaycard. So as a supplier, if your payment terms are 30 days, for example, you get paid on day 30, no change to your process, but the buyer can then pay Barclaycard back up to 56 days later, depending on the exact terms agreed. Just like we use credit cards in our personal use, right? We buy something today, but we don't actually make the payment up to maybe 56 days later, we get the extra cash flow. So this is good for suppliers because it makes no change to the supplier, but the buyer also benefits. And this is the first phase of the solution, but we'll keep you posted of other developments to come with Barclaycard, and there will be other solutions that have more benefits on the supplier side as well. So the third partner that we announced last year was Standard Chartered Bank. And here we have a bunch of different solutions. Yeah, just waiting for the slides. And this is a great example of how collaboration through our partners, we focus on what we do best, and we let our partners, the banks, focus on what they do best. So there are multiple different solutions here with Standard Chartered Bank. The first one is what we call supply chain finance, but sometimes it's also referred to as approved payables finance or reverse factoring. Now, in this case, what happens is once the invoice has been approved by the buyer, the bank steps in and pays the supplier early, say on day 10, which is much earlier than the agreed payment terms, say day 45 that you might have with your buyers. Now, of course, there is a cost of finance here that needs to be deducted from the invoice in order to get the earlier payment. But the good news is that the cost of finance is based on the buyer's credit rating. And the bank has done their risk assessment on the buyer. And by using the buyer's credit rating, which is normally very good, if not excellent, the suppliers actually get access to a rate of finance that they couldn't get if they were to go to the bank themselves. And the buyer pays the bank back later, say on day 45 in this case, so it creates a win-win situation. So that's solution number one, supply chain finance. But Standard Chartered also have other solutions that they would like to offer, and they are on the Ariba network. The second one is receivables finance. So same principle applies in that the suppliers get invoices paid early, but the risk now is taken on the supplier's credit rating. Okay, so the financing rates won't be as good as they were with supply chain finance, but the rates can still be very attractive. And that's because within the Ariba network, we know when a buyer has approved the invoice. We can notify the bank when the invoice has been approved, when that's done, and this reduces the risk and allows the bank to offer a better rate. So there are variations in this solution as well. For example, financing of pre-approved invoices, so invoices that haven't been approved by the buyer yet. And again, this is where bank, as an expert, steps in. They look at all of the different options available in that country, in that region, and present them to the customers. There's more that's also coming with Standard Chartered. For example, we're looking at purchase order financing. So that's something that they can also offer. So it's not limited to invoice financing or invoicing, as this session is all about. And then on the next slide, I wanted to talk about our own SAP Ariba discount management solution. So sometimes this is also referred to as dynamic discounting. With this solution, there is no bank involved in the middle. The buyer uses their own cash to pay the suppliers early. And there's quite a lot actually that goes into this solution, not just the technology, but also the services component, the consultancy that we offer to our customers. But just focusing on the supplier needs again, it's back to the same question. Where's my payment? Can I get paid early? If so, how do I get paid early? What's the cost to me of getting paid early, etc. And so with this solution, what happens is once the buyer has approved the invoice, it's presented to the supplier for an early payment. The supplier will see multiple dates between now and the invoice maturity date. So in this example, in the middle of the slide, you can see day 30 as an example of invoice maturity date. But what happens is the supplier is presented with multiple payment dates, early payment dates, and on each of those payment dates, the supplier will see an associated discount amount. So as a supplier, if I want to get paid on day 11, the discount rate will be higher than if I want to get paid on day 21. It's a sliding scale, as you can see in the diagram in the middle of this slide here. And basically, it ends up with day 30, which is the invoice maturity date, with 0% discount. So if a supplier doesn't want early payment, they just want on-time payment, regular payment, then they can leave the invoice and wait for it to be paid on day 30. And again, the benefits back to the supplier, it's all about cash flow. You need to manage your cash flow. If you need cash now, you need it in a week's time, you can manage that, or you can just leave it until the invoice is ready for payment on maturity date. The other thing is, in most contracts, normally terms are agreed between suppliers and buyers. So there may be a term to say, again, using this example on the slide, I will pay you on day 10 in return for a 2.5% discount. But that doesn't always happen, right? So buyers need to make sure that they can get the invoice in, they can get it processed, approved, and paid by day 10. Otherwise, they miss that 2.5% discount opportunity. And again, the solution here, that with the technology of the sliding scale, what we're doing is we're saying we recognize that doesn't always happen. So let's present the opportunity and offer early payment discounts from day 10 all the way up to day 30. That was it around our solutions. On the next slide, I'll talk around where discount management is available. So Alex already mentioned our 40 countries and regions where we have regulatory consistent for electronic invoicing. The discount management is available in a subset of those solutions. So it's available in 22 countries, highlighted in purple on this slide. But of course, similar to the way Alex mentioned, 150 plus countries for pro forma invoices, we can actually offer discount management in more than 22 countries, but you should really speak to your tax advisor and find out what the credit note processing is. But in these 22 countries, we have a fully automated process for creating the credit note and the amount on the credit notes, because that's something you can only know when the supplier clicks on the early payment discount and requests it. Now, on the next slide, I just wanted to talk about some of the things Alex has also mentioned around the new UI. We're doing the same thing when it comes to discount management. So you will see this new design. There's a before and after screenshot here. And on the right-hand side, you'll see things like cash forecasts, overdue invoices. So it will help the user understand, for example, I have a cash flow need of $35,000 in the next 10 days. How can I get that? How many invoices are maturing over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 days? And therefore, which invoices do I need to accelerate? There's other useful information, again, based on the persona, things like how much of my invoices are paid on time. So you see a statistic there, for example, 97% is paid on time. How many of my invoices have been paid early? So what is my DSO, for example? How is it reduced? It's reduced by 2 days. So there's a lot more information coming. It's more user-friendly. It's more engaging for the user. And I'll show the next slide as another example where we have this sliding scale discount. So currently what we have is the screenshot on the left. And in that, what you will see is a number of different dates, as I was talking about with an early payment. So the supplier can choose which early payment date they want to choose and click on one of those dates. That's all being improved. So you see the new screenshot on the right-hand side. It's a nice sliding scale. It's very graphical. So as a user, I can just hover the mouse and drag the payment date, and I'll see all the amounts change. So I'll see the invoice amount, I'll see the discount rate, the tax amount. All of that will change just as I slide my cursor along the different payment date options. So these are the new innovations that are coming in terms of improving the UI. With that, I will hand back to Lorraine.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex and Saeed. We hope you found this session useful. So Alex and Saeed both touched upon upcoming innovations, really exciting things. Alex talked about the exciting innovations coming into the invoicing user experience. So keep posted on any communications with regards to that. And Saeed talked about opportunities in dynamic discounting, as well as opportunities for the financing and payment space. And Saeed, if suppliers are interested in opportunities, for example, with Amex or Barclaycard, what are next steps for them to take?
First thing is to talk to your buyer, find out if your buyer is using one of these solutions, encourage them, explain to them that, as their supplier, you are interested in these solutions, but they are buyer-led programs. So the buyer has to initiate the Amex, the Barclaycard solution. Some of the solutions, for example, the receivables finance from Standard Chartered, they will become supplier-led, but at this stage, the solutions are buyer-led, yeah. So talk to your buyers.
Great. Thank you again. So this concludes this session. Thank you for tuning in to Invoicing Automation, and stay tuned for the rest of the Supplier Digital Summit. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.